Today I'm finally back, and to kick this one off, we're going to be going over some Minecraft build tips, tricks and hacks that will help you improve your building skills to the next level. Minecraft, as we know, is packed with hundreds of blocks, and it's very easy for some of those blocks to get a little bit forgotten about. And in some cases, some blocks people don't even use for building because they don't realise what can actually be done with those items. So today we're going to be going over a bunch of different ways to use them and how they can help you improve your building skills in general. Now, if you haven't done so already, please be sure to turn that subscribe button grey. It's free and it helps the channel out a bunch. And with that being said, let's get started. We're going to kickstart this one with string. Now, as you know, string is a crafting material used mainly for scaffolding and bows, but this item is about as close as we can get to a barrier block, which is only available in creative or with cheats. So placing this above any sapling, bamboo or sugarcane will simply stop it from growing. And this is great because this allows us to make our gardens and stuff look a bit more unique. We can cut crops off at a certain height, so bamboo and sugarcane, you can make them stop at 1 block high, 2 blocks high, 3 blocks high, and so forth. So this is really great for making unique gardens and making things feel a little bit more different. And it's also a great way of stopping things from overgrowing. Things like vines can be cut off in any spots, just place a bit of string there and it won't grow past it. Using string, we can also stop saplings from growing, so we can use them as small flowers or maybe even in fields to make them look like some form of crops. Because we can put the string to stop them from growing, we can allow a whole field of them, which has some really cool effects when they are used properly. Another great use of string is making canopies. By simply placing down a piece of string, we can place the carpet on top of it, and this is great for making things like 4-poster beds or umbrellas over the tables. Even can be used for some kind of market stalls because it creates a little kind of overhanging canopy above the market stall itself. So there's many ways we can use this and it creates a really effective look. Next up, we have another very simple one that often gets missed, and that is placing 3 fence gates in between 2 wall blocks. Now, you can use any wall blocks and any fence gates, but this creates a slight arch, which is great for detailing things like bridges and the edges of roof designs. Next, we're going to move on to trapdoors, which have so many uses here, so there may be some that I do miss. If I do, be sure to let me know in the comments. But these can simply be used as shelves, so you can place items on them and stuff like that, and this is great for interior decoration. But they can also be used to create smooth arches around windows or door frames, and can be placed inside a window area for a bit of decoration. You can place some dirt and then place some trapdoors around it to create flower planters, or place them on a wall next to a window to create a kind of shutter for the window. Again, a great little detailing trick. You can also use trapdoors to create nice details around the beds to make them look a bit more homely. Beds can look a little bit plain, so adding in a few trapdoors and stuff can add a bit of detail, such as headboards or footers to the beds. We can also take it a step further by placing a couple of campfires on top of each other. We can then put the campfires out using a shovel and place some food on it, and then we can surround it with some trapdoors, place a door in front of it, and there we go, we have a little food cupboard. Simple, but very effective for interior design. Let's take a look at some different ways that we can use blocks for flooring. Yeah, we can always use planks and keep it simple, but what about creating something a little bit different? One of the simplest ways to switch things up is using stripped logs, and to mix it up a little more, how about alternating which angles they are placed in? This creates some really cool patterns and effects in the flooring, and you can mix it up even more by combining different types of woods to create different colours and different patterns. How about flooring that looks a little bit more hard or wearing, so something maybe outside the box we don't usually use? We can use things like smithing tables and blast furnaces because these have great textures on the top of them, so when they're placed in the floor it gives out a really cool effect and something different that you don't see on many other textures. These are great for things like factories and warehouses and somewhere where you just generally want the floor to look a little bit more rough. Now, on the other side, if you're looking for something a little bit more softer, maybe you just want to place down a rug, why not combine some wool and carpet to create a very nice sort of worn down effect look on the rug, creating a little bit of texture to it. Now, this is also great when you're using things like upside down stairs because it covers the gap underneath. So this, you would place a wall block and maybe around it you would place some carpet. This way you still see the color underneath, but allows it to blend around the floor as well, which creates a really cool effect. How about we take it a step further and create something really nice, something looking a little bit more fancy. So maybe we could add some coral blocks and add some coral fan on top, and this creates some really colourful looking rugs. The only thing we have to make sure we do here is waterlog some slabs around the sides so that it doesn't lose its colour, unless you're looking for a grey rug, of course. If we head out into the garden, one of the ways I love to decorate gardens at the moment is by using the azalea blocks. The azalea blocks are great and they look just like mini hedges. So if we go ahead and place a row of coarse dirt and then we place some azalea on top with some random moss carpet placed on top of it, it gives you a little bit of roughness to the top of the hedges, but it creates a really nice looking hedge. And we can make this a step further by extending it with some normal moss blocks and make it taller, and then place the moss carpet on top of that again to create that bit of texture, and it works so well as a hedge. It's not see-through, but it has a much nicer look to it than just leaves. One of the things that often gets neglected, and that is stairways and balconies. People often using fences to block them off or just simple pillars and stuff like that, but we can take it so much more further. So first of all, we can start by using trapdoors to create a railing going up the stairs, and we can also place it around the edge at the top of the stairs so that we don't fall down. This is a great way to finish off the interior of a build and makes it feel a little bit neater, and having the trapdoors takes up less room, so it makes the stairway feel a bit smaller and more compact, fitting much nicer into interior builds. Now we can also use trapdoors on the balconies, but one of my favourites for decorating the balconies is by placing down lecterns with a trapdoor on top of them. It creates a really cool finish on the outside and looks so smart on many buildings, and it's just something different. It looks a bit thicker, a bit stronger, so it looks more supported and kind of just gives a much better look in general for a balcony, rather than something so thin as a trapdoor, which doesn't give you quite as good effect. Another great detail and effect for stairways is to add bookshelves or barrels underneath them. Adding barrels gives you a bunch of extra storage, so it's a great idea to add them under there, and it really just finishes off a little stairway on an interior. Now if you're building a stairway on the outside and want something a bit more grand, how about placing a full block at each side of the stair and then placing an upside down stair in front of it to create a much more grand look to the stairway. When it comes to building, texturing is probably one of the most extremely effective ways to detail any build. Simply find a couple of similar coloured blocks and randomly place them to create a nice textured or worn look on your walls. This can also be done with roofs in the right places, of course, but just adding in those different textures creates such a nicer look to a wall rather than something that looks so clean and plain. Those random textures really create a bit of roughness that's really needed to create that realism in your build. So when possible, always try your best to texture walls up as you can. Just make sure that the blocks are very similar in tone so that they can blend nicely. You can also work with gradients, having darker colours towards the bottom and slowly going into lighter colours as you go up. But that's probably better off for another video, because gradients can be quite an in-depth thing to kind of go over. But in general, starting dark at the bottom and heading lighter on as you go up the build is the way that you would work with gradients. Now I'm always one for saying that the small details matter, but one thing I never say is that the small details matter in every place possible. So you've got to just remember that a build is not solely focused on the house or the interior, it's also the exterior, the pathways, the walkways. There is a very simple way of detailing up a pathway. One, of course, is by adding some textures to create a bit of roughness. So if you're using a dirt path, maybe adding some coarse dirt and some brown concrete powder to give a little bit of a mixture and blend is a great way to go. Little details around the pathway as well. So if we use some cobblestone slabs, for instance, we could create some little small rockeries around the pathways here and there. Not too many, just a few dotted here and there. And then maybe some stone buttons. Stone buttons are great, they look a little bit like pebbles, and they just add that small little bit of detail, but they make a noticeable difference when you're making them. So just think of these things in place while you're building them, because they do make a huge difference. Detailing builds is not always easy, but one of the best things I say is keep the details simple. So simple things such as an elevated porch or entranceway will make a huge difference, and just having that nice entranceway at the front of the build is really going to make the build stand out and pop. You can also add things like little details around your windows, so using chains, fences, even lanterns will create such a nicer atmosphere around the build in general. Adding windows into the roof is also a great way of adding detail, but keep in mind the size of the build and keep the windows in proportion. You don't want anything too big and you don't want anything too small if you're building a very large build, so keep in mind how big your build is and make sure that the windows feel in proportion with the size of the build. Common mistake I see is when people start getting used to building in a particular style and they end up sticking to the same blocks all the time when they build. Now this is not particularly a bad thing, especially if you're building in a specific style, but it does start to make builds feel a little bit boring, especially if you don't have a huge selection of blocks that you build with. So it's nice to experiment here and mix up the blocks you're using, try and change up some of the colors and try to change up some of the look of the textures. For example, composters work great as a wall block, and I know not many people have used them. I've used them quite a few times and I think they make a great effect for a wall. They kind of give like a paneling effect, so they really have a nice look for little sort of country houses or cottages, and it just works really nicely. So I'm sure there's plenty of other textures that would work really well in builds as well like that, so mess around with it and try some different things out. You might be surprised at the effects you get with some of your builds. Mixing up the colours of your builds is also a key to creating a really nice village or city or town or whatever you're building, because when you start building too much of the same colours, no matter whether the build is a different shape or anything else, it's going to start feeling like you're walking around the same thing everywhere. So go ahead, switch up some of the colours, change some of the building roofs, change the styles and things that you're building with so that you create variety. Variety is going to be the key to creating a nice looking build in general. And remember, it's not always the build that makes all the details. Sometimes it's the small things that get forgotten about, such as things as using leaves, planters, flower pots, crafting tables, making little work areas, or even a small pile of logs with some extinguished campfires to create a little bit of chopped wood in it. Those little details, they really add to a build. They create an interest on the outside of the build and in general just adds to the look of the build. So it really helps make things look a little bit nicer, and having things like this scattered around the village creates that variety that you need. One of the things I love doing when it comes to building shops is adding wall and banners to create these little overhangs on shop fronts. They look really nice, really effective, and using them in different colours around your sort of cities and towns can create a nice bit of colour and a bit of a change from sort of place to place. So these are really cool to add in a few places in your city and really help sort of not only bring colour and look to the build itself, but also to the city in general. Another thing you can do is consider building some custom trees. Now, we'll be having a custom tree video coming very soon, but they don't always have to be big, huge, detailed trees. Just a few small little trees that are scattered with some leaves on some fences are a great way to detail your city. It doesn't always have to be huge. Like I said, just those small little trees, they can make a huge difference to any sort of town, build, city, or anything that you're building in general. Anyway, stay safe, keep building, and I'll catch you in the next one.